So I'll pitch this first one to George, but I'd like to get both of you guys' inputs on this. Do you believe, first of all, that traditional financial advice for even high income earners in marginalized communities, black communities, minority communities, that traditional advice still doesn't work for us? If so, why doesn't it work for people in our communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. The reason why I don't think that it works is because, for starters, a lot of the traditional advice in the community or in the financial advice industry is centered around assets under management, right? It's like you can't start the conversation until you have $250,000 to invest, right? And not to say that people don't have cash on the sidelines. What we found to be true is that our clients were starting businesses, they were becoming successful, they did have great cash flow, but they were very much in the beginning phases of building wealth, or didn't even know about that they should be focused on the accumulation of wealth, right? And so if we're saying that I got a client that's making a quarter million, half million, or even $1 million plus a year, but we can't start the conversation about wealth building because you don't have $250,000 to invest, I think that's kind of backwards and it's skewed. Because even when we look at our investment philosophy as a company, we are preaching that cash flow is king, right? The industry at large is saying, hey, invest for 40 years, and if you do everything right, you have $1 million at retirement. But we grew to understand and realize that money is not a pool, it's a tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that needs to be used and not something that we accumulate and look at in awe of. So that's why I don't think it works for really beyond just marginalized communities, but specifically for our communities, because we don't inherit money typically. A lot of us are first generation wealth builders, and most of our wealth is tied up into our high income skill set or the business that we have, which is a great leverage mechanism, but we just need to not be excluded from the conversation simply because we don't have $250,000 sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah, yeah. And Carter, I'm gonna give you the same question, but I'm gonna ask it in a different way because I love that response from George. And so I think about there are a lot of friends I have and friends I'm sure that you have that make really good money, but we still can't seem to catch up with our counterparts, non-melanated counterparts, and like what are they doing differently with the same amount of money to make sure they're accelerating a lot faster?
Yeah, and this is a great question. Because when I worked in corporate America, I worked at one of the big four accounting firms, and what I noticed from a company standpoint and from helping small business owners is that taxes is everyone's number one expense, right? So if two people both earn $100,000, but one of them has to pay $5,000 in taxes, but the other one has to pay $30,000 in taxes. That other person has $25,000 more in income every single year to invest, right? So I think that one thing we preach with our clients is that it's not just about how much money you make; it's about how much money you keep. And I think one of the easiest ways to increase your earning potential is to minimize how much money you have to give to the IRS. And I think as a community, we are so we're in the beginning phases and are so happy about just having money that we don't think about taxes, because like to even have disposable income is like, yo, we made it. Okay, cool. You made it to level one. You solved the income problem, but now that you solved the income problem, you're going to be walking into a tax problem. So I think, at least from my standpoint, helping people minimize their taxes so that they can have more money to invest is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and I'll stick with you, Carter, on this. I think about people who are transitioning from employment W-2 to maybe 1099 or even K-1. Like they're doing something different, with their revenue, their household income. They may not see that tax refund like a normal W-2 employee. So what do you
Right.
find is hurdles that people who traditionally would get a W-2 and get a refund at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, what are hurdles they have to get over to change how they think about taxes? Fundamentally, like not super complex, but just the fundamental stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that one of the best lessons I learned, at least when I was in college, our professor in one of our classes came in the room. And he said, "What's the best tax refund you can get?" And then everybody's writing down different numbers, and I'm like, "Yo, 10,000, 20,000, like the higher the better." And he let everybody write their answer down, and then he was like, "The best tax refund you can get is zero, because all the tax refund is you giving the IRS an interest-free loan for 12 months that they got to use and invest in whatever, and they gave it back to you with no interest. So I think the first thing I want people to understand is that the best tax refund you can get is zero, because that way it gets people to stop being excited, right, about getting $15,000, $20,000 back, because that was your money to begin with, right? So that's number one. I think number two is once you move from W-2 to employee, the responsibility for taxes shifts from your employer's responsibility to your responsibility, right? What some people think is a bad thing, but with responsibility also comes control. Because now that you're responsible for your own taxes, you now have control over your tax situation and how much you need to pay in any given year. So I think once we can adopt those two mindset shifts, we'll be better off.
George, when you go and start something like Melanin Money, first I want you to talk about what it is, but then when you talk about it, talk about what gaps you saw in the marketplace that said, there's still a need here that, me and Carter going to fulfill this.
Yeah, so I remember back in 2017, there was an article that was released that Black wealth was going to zero by 2052. And so here I was, at the time working with a small pool of clients who, I guess I had created this echo chamber for thinking that, well, surely, people get it and a lot more people are marching towards, this journey for building wealth, not realizing that at large, right, people still did not have an understanding of what it took. So I knew that we had to do something that was broader, something that was bigger, something that was more impactful. Me and Carter actually met at a conference in 2019. And at that conference, one of the speakers was like, hey, if you can just get your firm to 100 clients, like lifetime, right? Like you'll be good, you'll be coasting forever. And then I kind of heard it. I was just like, that seems a little bit low. It's like we got a lot more people to help, right? And then lo and behold, me and Carter, again, we didn't know each other at the time. We're walking to lunch and, again, it's a financial advisor conference. So it wasn't many of us that looked like us, right? Mm. And so, we just connected and he kind of felt the same way. He's like, did you hear what I just heard? And then, we realized that it was going to be, somebody had to do it. Somebody had to say, how can we serve and reach and impact more people? And so I do understand that some of the limitations of a traditional advisory environment is, staff and people, and maybe, you don't have the infrastructure to help, 1,000 people or 10,000 people. So we had to get really creative in what that looks like. So while we do still have an advisory firm where we are able to help a decent amount of folks, right? We know that that's not enough. And so that's why we decided to create this hybrid educational model where every other month we're basically doing a virtual conference where people who may be not in a position to hire an advisor or are curious if an advisor is right for them, they get to learn our top strategies over the course of 5 days. And what's beautiful about that is whether they get the chance to work with us or not, and Carter can give the specific stat, I know last year between our master classes and our virtual conferences, I think it was north of, Carter, what's the number?
Over 20,000 people last year.
Over 20,000 wow. people that
wow.
we were able to reach, right? And so we didn't have to do that. We could continue just to serve the clients who are making multi 6 figures, 7 figures, and continue to build our business because we still are serving people of color. But we knew that somebody with credentials had to step up and say, hey, look, everybody deserves access to quality financial information, right? Because the gap that we saw in the marketplace was the person who was super relatable, right? Who was a financial educator and can teach you about budgeting and saving. And those are all great things, but that's just scratching the surface for someone who maybe is a little bit further along. Then on the other end of the spectrum, we saw the person who was credible, who had all the credentials, but was very unrelatable, right? Maybe it was a middle-aged white man trying to reach, a woman of color. And so we found a sweet spot between the balance of relatability and credibility, right? So we had the credentials of, the best in class advisor, but we had the relatability of someone who, you can connect with. And that was kind of the void that we filled in the marketplace. And it's allowed us to serve people at scale while still building our firm behind the scenes.
Yeah, I want to go a level deeper on this, Carter. There's there's this book, The Color of Money, Mercer Baradaran, who in the book, there's this line that it kind of just changed my whole perspective on Black people and money. And she said, we have not so long ago been capital, and now we're trying to learn how to manage capital. And it's crazy, right? And it just blew everything up about how I thought. Because, you walk around, you judge people for the things that they do, and you like all this stuff that you like, why are we buying cars we can't afford, jewelry, and it said like we can't afford it. But then again, we have not so long ago been capital, and we're being asked to treat it, with its due respect. And so I think about some of the financial norms that have come from our community. Can you talk about how we break free from those ways of thinking? And so actually maybe talk about some of the norms that we've had. When we come up in the Black household, and maybe you don't have financial conversations at the dinner table. That's an issue. But how do we break free from some of these things and actually make progress?
Man, that's a loaded question, my brother, but a phenomenal question at that. I think the first step is opening up the conversation, right? Because I think awareness is one of the greatest things that we can achieve in our life. And so if money is a taboo topic and nobody wants to talk about it, how can we be educated on something we're unwilling to talk about? Right. So I think, for me, it was don't bring money up at the dinner table, put the money under your mattress because we can't trust these banks and all these things. And sometimes we have to question our parents' philosophies around money. Again, they did the best that they could with the information that they had, because not too long ago, they weren't allowed to even learn about money. So I think number one, it comes with just open conversations about money. And number two, I think it needs to come with a new level of vulnerability, because I think people don't talk about money because they're ashamed. And if you're ashamed about not knowing about something about money, if you vocalize your lack of knowledge around it, it can make you feel ashamed. So I think we need to just be vulnerable about our lack of understanding. And once we know more, we can have more. One thing that we tell our clients is the more that you learn, the more that you earn, but you have to be willing to learn first. So I think those two things really help push the narrative forward.
I want to stick with you, Carter, on this, because I think about, I've been following you on Instagram for some time, and this is one of those I'm gonna ask for a friend questions.
Feel free, brother. Let it ride.
We do a lot of those too.
Yeah, we do those. Yeah. And so, I got a friend who owns a business, and I think about how you take these remarkable trips, and you can go out, have great food, either the best restaurants, and some of the stuff that I've seen on your IG, and I'm like. Then at the end, you're talking about like this trip, was a write-off, or this trip was, whatever. Like how, kind of break down some of these scenarios and how you manage them.
Yeah. So the first thing I want people to understand is that the tax code is a rule book that allows us to win the tax game if we're willing to learn about the tax game, right? The tax code was created to help entrepreneurs and investors avoid paying taxes. That's why it was created. So when it comes to trips, the IRS has a very important code section. It's code section 162A, and it says any expense that is both ordinary and necessary for you to operate your business, that trip can be tax deductible in your business. And if we think about these big corporate companies, they have company retreats where they take their whole company out somewhere and have a big event to improve company morale. And if these big companies can do it, so can small business owners, right? So if you take a trip and you decide to bring some of your team members with you, we just had a retreat with our team members in Turks and Caicos. We brought our team members to this retreat in Turks, and we game planned and strategized for 2025, right? We made sure we worked at least 4 hours a day. Each day we met with the entire team. We documented the process. We took notes. We took meeting minutes. We added the documents to our company book. And if you do those things, the IRS says that trip was ordinary and necessary to help your business grow. Due to that fact, the flights are to that location is tax deductible. The lodging, the Airbnb that we got was 100% tax deductible, and the meals that we got catered were 50% tax deductible. So it's just strategically thinking, how can I turn something I'm about to already pay for anyway into a tax deductible expense? And one thing we train our clients on is, before you spend any money, ask yourself, is there a way I can make this expense both ordinary and necessary for my business? If so, we're going to use that business card. We're going to document the process, and we're going to save on taxes.
So I think I was on George's site doing research for this, and there was this beautiful presidential Rolex. And I wonder, can my presidential day be tax deductible?
Well, I'm going to try to make Carter proud and answer this question the right way, right?
There you go.
I'm a watch guy. I've got Carter into watches now. And one of the things that he told me, early on, he was like, well, I know we have the content that we focus on when it comes to, helping people build wealth. He's like, but you're a watch collector. He's like, if you want to kind of make these things deductible, if you started creating content from the lens of a collector and how your watches are an investment, right, there could be a world where it could be a tax deduction, right? So I, again, will defer to the resident expert on the nuances and the details on that. But Carter, if you want to share a little bit more context on if the Rolly can truly be tax deductible.
And I'm gonna add something else onto that too, because I've heard people like Carter talk about. Cause I'm gonna add something because I want you to answer that, but there's more. And so I've heard people talk about, hey, you know, maybe the Louis Vuitton bag is not, maybe you know the Cartier or the Chanel whatever is not. But I think about, because I'm a schemer, I'm up here scheming, like, okay, but what if
world class finesse with takes suggestive, you hear me?
So I'm like, what if I'm just doing content and it's a part of my, you know, I gotta be presentable for the camera, or if I'm like shooting like fictional shorts for YouTube or for Instagram, like, but I'm playing character. Now can I go buy that Louis Vuitton?
Okay. So yeah, I'll answer both. I'll answer George's question, then I'll circle back to yours. So the IRS says if something is in the pursuit of income, you can rationalize that expense being ordinary necessary. So if Rolex was to sponsor our podcast, right, and then we were to talk about watches, the more we talk about watches, the bigger the Rolex sponsorship is going to be, right? So that is a direct correlation with how we can make money from advertising our watches. So therefore, that could make our Rolexes tax deductible, because showing them in our content can help Rolex stroke a bigger check when it comes to sponsoring our show. So that's how you would write off a Rolex, the easiest way I can explain it. Now, when it comes to clothing, the IRS is very, 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 very strict and clear about your ability to write off clothes. They say if you are going to try to write off clothes, it has to be a costume to the point where if you wore it out in public again, people would stare, or you just can't wear it out in public again. So if you were shooting a scene with a firefighter costume on for your short vlog, then cool, because if you wore that in public, you would be laughed at, right? But the Louis Vuitton, the Chanel, like that's not gonna, because there's nothing ordinary about that, right? There's nothing ordinary about a $2,000 jacket.
But my scene won't hit as hard. This scene I'm shooting, it just won't hit as hard if it's
I know,
Chanel,
the look, but like it might, but like, yeah. So I just tell people like trying to validate the cost of a designer purchase as a tax deduction. There are easier ways to save on taxes that will cost less red flags.
I like that. You know, so also I want you to go one more step in this direction. I want to talk about vehicles for a second. Like, you know, if I'm talking about you know, maybe there's this Range Rover, and I've heard like this 6,000 pound or 9,000 pound rule. I'll let you touch on that. Or what if it's not 6,000 pounds, but there's this really nice car, but I'm using it for business purposes for the major point.
Yeah, so with business vehicles, the major point I like to communicate when I talk about vehicles to business owners is that there's a common misconception that the vehicle has to be in your business name in order for you to deduct it on your taxes, and that's just not true. What the IRS cares about is, do you plan on using this vehicle for business use or not? So if the vehicle's in your personal name, but you plan to use it for business, okay, great, we can still use it for business up to the percentage of business use that we use. So if you have one vehicle, it's valid that you can use it 80% business and 20% personal. Cool. That means that 80% of the expenses related to that vehicle, interest on your car note, car insurance, gas, repairs, maintenance, oil changes, all the expenses associated with that vehicle, 80% of those expenses is tax deductible. But you also get an expense for money you didn't spend, which is called depreciation, which is basically saying, hey, because we know a car is a depreciating asset, we're going to give you a tax deduction today for your car losing value tomorrow. And if the vehicle weighs less than 6,000 pounds, the IRS will let you write off up to $20,000 in depreciation the first year that you rent it out. So you can have $20,000 of depreciation plus another $4,000 in car expenses. You can have a $24,000 tax deduction that year for your vehicle. Now with the 6,000 pound rule, what makes that robust and something that business owners should seek to have is because instead of having that $20,000 cap for depreciation, you actually get to write off a percentage of the vehicle's value. So if you were to get a $100,000 Cadillac Escalade, which weighs over 6,000 pounds, you would be able in 2025, unless Donald Trump changes something, at the moment, you'll be able to write off $40,000 or 40% of that vehicle's cost in the first year you receive it, even if you didn't even if you financed to put no money down. So in this case, we went from having a $20,000 deduction to a $40,000 deduction by getting a vehicle that weighs a little bit more.
I like that. I like that. So we've talked, which I love, talking about spending money in this way and how to save on spending money. Let's talk about making some money. How do we make more money? So we can start with investing here. So people who are listening to this and are new to investing, let's say, hey, George, you've got somebody who's got, $5,000 and they don't need to touch it to live, but it's sitting in a savings account right now, or it's sitting under their, pillow, to, Carter's earlier point. What should I be doing? Let's start with $5,000. What should I be doing with that money?
Right. Yeah, I'm a financial advisor, so my mind defaults is I want more context, but I'll make some assumptions. Assuming you got your emergency fund, assuming that this is truly money that you can allocate towards investing, the way I would approach it is very straightforward, right? We teach our clients this philosophy called the Burger King investment strategy, right? And essentially what that means is you have to learn how to copy the right cat. McDonald's spends millions of dollars a year determining where they want to put the next McDonald's, right? Burger King, however, says, well, shoot, McDonald's did all the heavy lifting. I'm just going to put my Burger King in proximity to McDonald's because fast food is fast food, right?
I like that.
Burger King knows that somebody's going to be running late for work and they want that, even though they want that McGriddle, they're going to settle for the French toast sticks at Burger King because the line ain't as long, right? So when you think about that from an investing lens, right, like Vanguard, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, all these big investment institutions, they spend tens of millions, right? Arguably hundreds of millions of dollars a year on analysts and research to determine what investments should go into these particular funds, also known as ETFs or indexes, right? And I always like to explain it from the vantage point of it, looking at it like a mall, right? If you go to your favorite mall, it has hundreds of stores. And if 1, 2, 5, or 10 of those stores, don't do well, is the mall going to close down? We know the mall's not going to close down. We can understand that rationally. And it's the same thing for the investing world. If you invest in a Vanguard ETF that has 500 different companies in it and 3, 4, 5, or 10 of them are underperforming, the overall fund is still going to be okay, right? And so if you just copy the right cat, i.e. hit the buy button on Vanguard's website, and you just close your laptop and don't do anything else for the next 12 months, on average, right? Well, let's just speak to the last 12 months, your money would have made you nearly 25%, right? And so that's step one. Just not trying to be a investing expert and look at the charts, like just copy the right cat. You need to focus. If you are going to focus some time on something, focus your time on figuring out how you can invest more than $5,000, i.e. how can I become more valuable to the marketplace to have more disposable income to invest versus me trying to become a world-class investor, right? Once you do that, there's other levers you can pull, like looking inside of the ETF and looking at some of the top investments that are there and say, you know what, if I have $5,000 to invest, maybe $3,000 I invest in the ETF, and maybe $2,000 I pick out some of the top winners. Maybe I'm investing in Apple and Nvidia. Now, if you're watching this in real time, you might say, maybe not Nvidia because they just got hit hard. But which is actually a great time to buy. I was about to say, I'm thinking of how they're thinking, right? Which actually is a great time to buy. Exactly. But more of the story is picking some of those bigger winners, right? They could potentially give you greater returns than just picking the index. But if you have $5,000 to invest, that's exactly what I would advise. And then from there, as your investment grows, there's other strategies that you can take advantage of that can make more sense as you have more disposable income to invest.
Yeah, at the risk of having you say, I need more context again, I'm going to give you a statement that my financial advisor has said to me, and it again changed the way I look at money. I was talking to her about my financial portfolio and things like that. And we were talking about the money that was in my bank account. And she was like, true wealth is not in the bank balance. And I would, without giving you more context, I just want you to speak on what that really means. We'll start with George, and then we'll have Carter jump in on this too.
Yeah. Well, because of how our economy is set up, right? Our money loses its purchasing power year over year, right? And so even though it seems safe and you can look at it, you can touch it, and it doesn't decrease unless you withdraw, every year the money that you have in your bank account is going to have less purchasing power in the following year. And so you're losing the ability, it's costing you more to live as time goes on, right? So the reason why wealth is not created in the bank is because you're quite literally losing wealth due to inflation, right, when your money is in the bank, right? And so the way that we hedge inflation is we put our money in investments that we believe are going to outpace inflation, so that at minimum we're keeping up with that and our purchasing power isn't decreasing. And in a perfect world scenario, if your investments are really outpacing inflation, it actually becomes cheaper to live as time goes on, right? Because if inflation is going up at a rate of 2%, 2.5%, but your investment account is going up at a rate of 10% and your money's parked there, that means all things remaining constant, it costs you less to live as long as you are investing your money over time versus leaving it in the bank account.
Love that. Carter, anything you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, just like think about what helped me conceptualize why I take my money out of a bank account, out of a savings account. If you really understand the banking system, like they're robbing you day by day. And I think this is important for the audience to understand. So you go to a bank, you give them $10,000. They put it in your savings account, right? They give you less than 1%. You open you go to your online bank and you see it's $10,000 in your account. But the $10,000 is not actually in the bank, right? They go and lend your money out to somebody, or better yet, they lend it back to you, because then you go to the bank the next day and say, hey, can I get a credit card? And they're like, of course, we'll give you a $10,000 credit card limit. And you're like, oh my God, I got a credit card with $10,000 limit, but they're gonna charge you 24% interest rate on that credit card, right? So you use that card. So basically they just gave you your $10,000 back at 24% interest, where they're holding your money in the bank account at less than 1% interest, and they're making a 23% arbitrage on you every time you use the card. So like once you understand that the banks are getting rich off of having your money there, like you like, well, instead of you getting rich off my money, why don't I get rich off my money? And that's when we take our money out of bank accounts and we put them in investing accounts.
Yeah, I want to take this a little bit of a detour here, and I'm start with Carter on this. It's like for those with an irregular or entrepreneurial income, it doesn't necessarily hit every Friday. How do we create solid financial plans when you have that irregular? It may be a decent, income, but it's not regular.
Right.
Yes. So one of the best books I can have any entrepreneur read, especially when they learn how to be a good steward over their finances, is a book called Profit First by Mike McCallum.
Yeah, I'm actually reading that right now.
Name.
Yeah.
Dude, read it every year. Okay.
Yeah.
So that book will change the game 100%. For every entrepreneur. And basically the philosophy that the book teaches is if you don't give your money a destination, it will run wild. Right.
That's a fact.
And so what the Profit First method is, you set up separate accounts and you give these accounts different purposes. So you have an account for income, you have an account for expenses, have an account for payroll, have an account for your own self as an officer's compensation. You have an account for taxes, definitely. And as money comes into these accounts, you separate it based off a percentage. So again, in our example, if you have a $10,000 a month, cool. Well, a portion of that is going to go towards taxes. A portion of that is going to go towards paying yourself. A portion of that is going to go for expenses of the business. And then you have these different buckets of money in your business. And if you have a low month and you see like, oh, okay, well, my expense account is running low. Well, guess what? It's time for you to stop spending money right now. Right. And having these different accounts set up and breaking your money and allocating it by percentages based off versus just having all your money sitting in one account. This is the best way that entrepreneurs can own their money and create a system where even though it's going to be highs and lows in the business, you still know how to, how your business is doing and how to move your finances going forward.
Yeah. George, so many of us, specifically in our community, we grew up thinking or hearing debt is, you do as much as you can to get out of debt. We see it purely as a negative thing. Too many of us do. I want you to talk about how debt is a tool and how you can leverage debt to, find your way to wealth.
That's a phenomenal question, right? So I think when most people think about debt, they think about it in terms of purchasing liabilities, right? You buy a car and 5 years from now, that car is worth less than you originally purchased it for. And when you look at all the payments that you made, you paid more than you originally borrowed, right? So when you look at debt from that lens, it's like, why would I ever borrow? Like the system is rigged. But when you look at debt from the lens of leverage and say, hey, look, I'm going to borrow this money, but I'm going to borrow it to buy an investment that I believe the interest that I'm going to earn is going to be greater than the interest that I'm going to own, right? Simply put, if I borrow money at 6%, I use that money to buy a house, or I use that money as a down payment to buy a business, or even I use that money to invest in the stock market, and then my returns significantly outpace the interest that I owe, then it's just a game of arbitrage similar to the bank, right? So it's like, okay, well, I borrowed it at 6, I got 12%, right? After even I pay the bank back, right? There's still a 6% spread on money that wasn't mine, right? Which is naturally going to speed up your ability to build wealth because it's like you have more money to play with that you didn't originally have. So when you get on the right side of the equation and you use borrowed money to build wealth and use borrowed money to invest, then it can be a tool. And that is a tool that we can use to catch up, right? Because it's like quite literally, if I make $100,000 a year, I borrowed another $50,000 a year, meaning I've increased my productivity as if I made 50,000. On the other 50,000, I got to pay the 6%. But however, now I've identified investment opportunities that are going to be maybe double that percentage, right? And now that's how I'm able to compound my wealth a lot faster. So yeah, it can 100% be a tool. Obviously, you want to do the math. I think most people are afraid of debt. They just don't do the math, right? It's like they look at it as a liability. It's like, oh, I'm going to pay interest. I don't want to pay interest. But does it matter if what you got in return outpaces the interest that you paid, right? And I think once you just do the math, and that's the beautiful thing about personal finance, you'll be able to see that debt can be an amazing tool in accelerating your wealth building.
So what's interesting is, as I am reading Profit First, and it led me to this question that I'm about to ask, but I got to tee this up first. So George, I was reading Profit First, as Carter talked about, and so I set up all these 5 accounts. And during that process, I was just looking through my statements from my Amex, and a couple other cards. And I found $700 of things I was spending every month that I had no use for. $700 a month. Things, subscriptions on iTunes, whatever, like just stupid stuff that I don't even use anymore. And I'm like, I can't believe I've been paying $700 a month in stuff that I haven't even opened up. And I, as a financial advisor, George, I want you to talk about like this concept of money leaks, like these expenses or inefficiencies that we have that we just are not even aware of. I'm gonna let you on this card. I'm gonna let you cook on this, Carter, too. I'm gonna let you go too.
Oh yeah,
but I'm
you got it.
Yeah. One thing that we have all of our clients do is we call it a finding money exercise, right? It's like, because what happens is, you accumulate these expenses over time, right? And if you don't have awareness, if you're not having a money date with your money every week where you're looking at it, you forget about it. You forget about the gym membership from the gym you no longer go to. You forget about the Apple iTunes subscription that was annual and you forgot to cancel and you still getting hit with it, right? Those are things that just over time you start to accumulate all this extra baggage, if you will, right? And so I think awareness is the greatest lever that you have when it comes to building wealth. We recommend our clients every week have a money date, whether you actually have somebody to review it with, or if it's just you and your online banking, you have a money date where you sit down and you review, hey, this is what I got coming up this week, and this is how it should go. Based upon how the week went, do I need to make any adjustments? Because oftentimes people get scared about budgeting because they think about it being restrictive. But remember, this is your life. So if you got friends coming in town at the end of the month, you want to buy bottles, you want to go all out, well, cool. Well, then you need to, in the beginning of the month, right, make sure that you're not allocating the money towards DoorDash and getting nickel and dime. I think what happens is people don't zoom out quickly enough to figure out, like, what do I want my life to actually look like? There's a story I always tell. When I first got in the financial services industry, it was one of my first conferences I went to. And the young lady was like, in 2011, 1 billion drill bits were sold. And for those who don't know what a drill bits are, because you're not too handy, it's a little thing you put into a drill to maybe hang up artwork and different things in your house. She said, of the billion drill bits that were sold, nobody wanted a drill bit. She said, now what if I told you that they use the drill bits to hang artwork in office parks and residential homes all across the country, but they didn't necessarily want the artwork either. What they cared about is the feeling that they got when they walked in the room where the artwork was hung. So how does that translate to your money? When you look at your bank account, do you care if it's $1 million or 100,000 or 10,000? Not really, right? Do you care if it's in what type of account it is? Is it a Roth IRA? Is it a brokerage account? You don't really care about that. That would be the equivalent of me walking into your house, looking at a beautiful picture and saying, man, I'm really curious of the oak wood handle that you used on the hammer to hang that, and the nails, were they steel or were they? Nobody cares. What you care about is where you're going to be able to go, what you're going to be able to do, the people that you're going to be able to help, and the lifestyle that you're going to be able to live. So once you can align your financial resources to that North Star, budgeting and money management seems a lot more realistic because it's not, I'm just doing the adult thing that everybody should do, which is save and invest my money. You're anchoring it in your values.
Yeah.
I like to call it value-based spending. So when you're looking at your expenses, right, you ask yourself two questions. Does this spending align with what I say I value? Number one. And number two, is there a more cost-effective alternative? Sometimes there might not be a cost-effective alternative, but at least asking the question puts you in the right frame of mind. Because if you look at your online banking, you see food, and your response is, well, it's okay because I'm going out to brunch with the homies and we get the fellowship, we get to have a good time. I said, well, hold on. What you're saying is you value the fellowship, not necessarily the food. So maybe we can come up with more creative ways to extract what you really want from this scenario that's still quote unquote budget friendly. So that's the way I think about it. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and Carter, I want you to cook on this too, because I think about that $700 that I already had and was spending. By now clawing that back, I just made $700.
Yeah. And let me just, because I want to have a relatability moment. We are not above reproach here. Like, we still forget. Like, I did exercise with my assistant last year. Like, let's see where I spent some money last year, because it was a fast year. I spent $17,000 on Ubers last year, and I didn't realize it because, nickel and dime, you don't see it to the end of the year. And I have to sit myself down and say, okay, Carter, is riding an Uber is that worth $17,000 for you? $17,000 to you? No. If not, you can use that money to buy a car and just drive more, or give up the car you already have and just go all in on Uber. What we can't do is have both. Right. So I just want to let people know we're not above reproach here. We have to take our own advice a lot. And it's just understanding, what do you want your money to do for you? And how do you want it to be the tool that it can be to help you grow and get towards your dreams? Because what I did to make it make it hit home for me is I put that $17,000 in a retirement calculator at 10% for 50 years, and I saw how much money it could have made me if I didn't spend it. So that going in 2025 is going to make sure I don't make the same mistake again.
So I want you to talk a little bit about Melanin Money, but I want you to first just talk about some tools, technologies or et cetera. Both of you guys, I want you to do this on things that you would advise, people add, on their phone or, other, when you talk about that, financial date, George, like things people should be doing. What are tools, resources we should use to help us both manage our money better and grow our money, earning capacity?
Yeah. Do you want me to start first, or Carter?
Go ahead, George.
Okay, cool. One tool that I think is great. So we talk about money management is Rocket Money, right? Rocket Money. By now, y'all need to be sponsoring us at this point, y'all. But Rocket Money is a great app, right? That's just going to give you that visibility to know where your money's going. Do you have a subscription that's coming up that you should be canceling? And it's really going to give you that awareness to be able to claw back some of that money that you can use to invest and build wealth. So from a money management perspective, I think Rocket Money is an amazing app. From an investing standpoint, I really love an app called M1 Finance because one of the things we talked about was, how do I leverage, debt as a tool to build wealth? M1 Finance is one of the most easy platforms that exists where you can invest your money and they will give you a line of credit based upon the value of your portfolio value, right? So if you have $50,000 invested, you'll give you a line of credit for $25,000, right? And for all intents and purposes, sometimes it depends upon what your investments are, but conceptually speaking, about 50%. And so once you have a handle of your finances and you're investing, it's like, wow, okay, now just by investing my money, instead of having the money in the bank, if I were to withdraw $25,000, I'm leaving $25,000 in there that's eroding, right, to inflation. And then when I take it out, right, I got $25,000 to play with. I can have my full $50,000 remain invested and still get access to $25,000, right? So I strongly recommend having an app like M1 Finance and investing following the Burger King investment strategy that I shared earlier in the podcast. So that's a money maximizing standpoint. Now, from a money making standpoint, if you're an entrepreneur, just make sure you have your QuickBooks or whatever accounting app on your phone, and just on a regular basis, make sure that you're reviewing the P&L. I think one thing that a lot of entrepreneurs shy away from is money-making activity, right? It's what makes all of this easier, just so we're on the same page, what makes building wealth easier, what makes money management easier, is making more money. Now, obviously, you still got to be a good steward over your money, but one of the things that helped a lot of my early clients out is I looked at their expenses, what can I cut? I'm like, you're honestly not doing too bad. I was like, you need to make more money. Right? And so the same level of awareness we need to have when it comes to spending is the same level of awareness we need to have when it comes to making money. What was the target revenue goal for this month? Where am I at in the first 7 days? Where am I at mid-month, right? And we do something in our company called halftime report, right? Like we know what our goal is for the month. We're not waiting to the end of the game to figure out we lost the game, right? So at halftime, where are we relative to the goal? Which obviously you log it into your QuickBooks and it's up to date. You can see that, right? And you'll be able to make game time or halftime adjustments, if you will, to be able to make those adjustments. So those are at least 3 things I would do, because I like to look at things in buckets of make, manage, and maximize. And so those are 3 tools that you can use that can be beneficial.
Cardi, you can do the same thing, but also talk about Melanin Money on this, please.
Yeah, so I'll give one, and I'll go to the Melanin Money conversation. I love doing exercise with our clients, having them go to the National Registry of Unclaimed Retirement Benefits, because when you start a business, right, you most likely left your retirement plan in your previous employer. So this website will allow you to go find any other retirement plans that you might have left behind in previous employers that you forgot about or that you can find at XYZ. And then we're able to take those old retirement plans, roll them over into your small business retirement plan. And we can even set it up in a way where we can use some of that money to borrow. We can borrow from our retirement plan, use some of that money to jumpstart our business. So just finding all the money that we left in previous employers, moving it over to our own self-employed retirement plan that we own, that we control, and that we can help grow faster. So that's the exercise that we do with clients to make sure we're not leaving any money in the past. And I think from a Melanin Money standpoint, we have so many tools in our community to help our clients get to the next level. And I think one of the best things that we do for our clients is that we give them one, accountability to advisors that they can work with to really help them maximize their money, but also just giving them all the tools and resources and things that we use for ourselves over the years to really help them maximize their money and minimize their taxes. And that's why, all of our clients as a part of our Melanin Millionaire Club, not only are we helping them with the saving and investing part, but we're helping them achieve net worth milestones. I don't think we mentioned it earlier, but every year we have an award show where we celebrate our clients for hitting net worth goals, whether it's their first 100,000 net worth, their first $500,000, their first $1 million, their first $5 million. And we celebrate our clients so that instead of money being a taboo topic, it's actually something that they're willing to talk about, excited to talk about, because now we're talking about different milestones and we're celebrating hitting these wealth markers. And I think in 2024, we helped our clients increase their net worth by over $100 million. And we get to celebrate with them at the award show. So I think it's just taking money from being a taboo topic, and what Melanin Money is doing is taking it and making it something that's worth talking about and something that's worth celebrating.